Okay. Thank you, Sterling. Thank you, Joe, Congressman Heelskamp, and the Heartland Institute for putting this together. My name is Kevin Dayaratna, and I'm the Senior Statistician and Research Programmer at the Heritage Foundation, and I'm going to talk about the peace dividend, the benefits of ending the war on fossil fuels. So, I want to start out with a fundamental question. Let's think about what is the potential of American energy. And President Trump really hit on this in the summer of 2017 when he tweeted, "Our new American energy policy will unlock millions of jobs and trillions in wealth. We are on the cusp of a true energy revolution." Now, the thing is, when I read this tweet, it doesn't actually do justice to really illustrating the potential of American energy as much as his actual speech did. So as a result, I'm going to play the entire clip in its entirety.
When it comes to the future of America's energy needs, we will find it, we will dream it, and we will build it. American energy will power our ships, our planes, and our cities. American hands will bend the steel and pour the concrete that brings this energy into our homes and that exports this incredible newfound energy all around the world. And American grit will ensure that what we dream and what we build will truly be second to none. We will be number one again all the way. Going to make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So President Trump really starts to speak volumes about the potential we have here. So let's just think about this a little bit. But first, let's just talk about energy in and of itself. Energy is literally the key building block of civilization. From lighting up your home, to enabling you to drive your cars, to enabling this very conference to operate, energy is literally the basis of anything and everything that we do. So now, over the last, say, 8-9 years, what did we hear about energy and its potential sources? Well, during the Obama years, we heard that fossil fuels are evil. And they're evil because they emit carbon dioxide, which contributes significantly to anthropogenic global warming. So as a result, there were a number of policy suggestions that were provided by policymakers. What solutions were proposed? Firstly, there was cap and trade. Like, for example, the Waxman-Markey bill, which President Obama couldn't even get through his filibuster-proof Senate. Then there was a Clean Power Plan, which President Obama issued the EPA to actually try to issue carbon-based regulations. And then subsequently, the Paris Agreement, which was an agreement amongst countries all across the world to curb greenhouse gas emissions simply because the threat of global warming is a fundamental threat to humanity and we must do something to stop it. So now let's just think about it. When you're going to make a fundamental change to such an important building block of civilization, it's important to quantify the economic impact, and this is often overlooked. So at the Heritage Foundation, we have the Heritage Energy Model, which is a derivative of the Department of Energy's National Energy Modeling System that enables us to quantify the economic impact of various long-term energy policies. So regarding the Clean Power Plan, I actually testified on this on Capitol Hill about 2 years ago. By simulating the impact of the Clean Power Plan versus the current trajectory we had currently been on before the Clean Power Plan had been instituted, we noticed that by instituting the associated carbon capture regulations, that by 2035, there would be an average employment shortfall of over 80,000 lost jobs, a loss of income of more than $10,000 for a family of 4, an up to 5% increase in household electricity expenditures, and an aggregate $1 trillion loss in GDP. At the Heritage Foundation, we also have the model for the assessment of greenhouse gas-induced climate change, which enables us to quantify the climate impact of various carbon capture or various even changes to carbon trajectories over the long run. And we noticed that by 2100, the result would be less than 0.2 degrees Celsius temperature mitigation and less than 2 centimeters of sea level rise reduction. And this is, again, assuming a climate sensitivity that is probably too large and eliminating all carbon dioxide emissions from not just the United States, all industrialized countries completely. Then the Paris Agreement. Let's think about that. So President Trump actually, so copies of our research are actually back here in the back. You guys are welcome to pick up copies. This was a paper my colleagues Nick Loris and David Kreutzer and I published at the Heritage Foundation. It was actually referenced by President Trump over the campaign trail, candidate Trump as well as President Trump, for reasons why we should pull out of the Paris Agreement, and he was 100% right. Instituting the associated carbon capture regulations that come with the Paris Agreement, we noticed that by 2035, there would be an average employment shortfall of over 600,000 lost jobs, a loss of income of over $20,000 for a family of 4, an up to 20% increase in household electricity expenditures, and an aggregate $2.5 trillion loss in GDP. And again, using the MAGIC model, MAGIC with 2 C's, the model for the assessment of greenhouse gas-induced climate change, you see these negligible temperature changes and sea level rise reductions. And this is, again, assuming a climate sensitivity that is probably too large. So now we see that these policies, they result in significant economic devastation, but negligible environmental change. So what is all this poorly designed policy premised under? The answer is the so-called social cost of carbon. And I've talked about this quite a bit. I gave a talk on this at Heartland's International Conference on Climate Change in March. The detailed talk about the SCC is available on YouTube, if you're interested. Don't really want to go too much into the details here, but the SCC is basically the tool that the elite left used as its basis for justifying this ridiculous regulatory policy in terms of energy. It is a construct based on research in climate economics, and was proposed as a basis for regulatory policy by the Obama administration's Interagency Working Group. And in a nutshell, it is defined as the economic damages per metric ton of carbon dioxide emissions. So the question is, how do you actually estimate the cost, the social cost of carbon? So the general question becomes, what is the long-term economic impact of carbon dioxide emissions summed across a particular time horizon? And there were 3 statistical models. They're actually called integrated assessment models that the federal government had been using: the DICE model, the FUN model, and the PAGE model. And these are complicated models that come with a series of equations modeling economic growth and climate response, and they're computed by what statisticians refer to as Monte Carlo analysis. The idea is that there are various random, or what statisticians refer to as stochastic components, and as a result, these models need to be repeatedly estimated, and then as a result of that, distributional properties of the social cost of carbon can be computed. So, as with any model, these models are grounded by assumptions, namely the specification of a discount rate, the specification of an equilibrium climate sensitivity distribution, and the specification of a time horizon. So the discount rate is interesting, and we notice that the Obama administration stealthily ignored advice regarding the discount rate provided by the Office of Management and Budget. The whole idea is that, assuming that the social cost of carbon is legitimate, which I'm going to show you it's not, but assuming it's legitimate, what should be invested to avert these damages from occurring, and what would be the rate of return on that investment? The Office of Management and Budget, in Circular A4, they specifically stipulated that 7% must be used as part of such cost-benefit analysis. Despite this fact, the Obama administration ignored the 7%. I have my own theories as to why when I testified on the Hill about this also. But at any rate, we ran it for them at 7%. How about the specification of an equilibrium climate sensitivity, or ECS, distribution? So most research indicates that the Earth's temperatures will rise as a result of increase in carbon dioxide emissions. The question is, to what degree? No pun intended. The concept of ECS distributions enable one to probabilistically quantify this phenomenon, and we noticed that the Obama administration had been using outdated assumptions regarding climate sensitivity that basically overstated the probability of high-end global warming, and therefore enabled the administration to beef up its results to justify its regulatory agenda. And lastly, and I think you guys are going to love this, is a specification of a time horizon. As I talked about, projected economic damages are summed across a time horizon. Okay, so what is that time horizon? Well, foolishly, these models try to make projections 300 years into the future. So when you think about it, just think about the economy and how it changes. There are many things here. Let me ask the audience, how many of you have a smartphone? Okay. A significant amount, right? But when you think about it, many of these things, the smartphone, the tablet, the fax machine, even the internet, these things would have been mere science fiction several decades ago, yet they're so commonplace today. Similarly, we have no idea what the economy is going to look like several decades, let alone 3 centuries into the future, so it's hard to predict what these things are going to look like. But moreover, when you think about actual temperature forecasts, our good friend John Christie, who presented this in front of Congress, juxtaposed IPCC temperature extrapolations against actual satellite balloon and satellite data and weather balloon data. And he noticed the stark difference in the gross overprediction. So even from a climate perspective, how on earth can we reliably trust models that try to predict temperatures 300 years into the future when we can't even accurately forecast 20? So now, what does altering these assumptions made by the Obama administration do? Some of this work was joint with my colleague Ross McKittrick, who's sitting right here. We ran 2 of the 3 models in-house at the Heritage Foundation, the DICE model and the FUN model. The PAGE model we refused to run in-house because the author, Chris Hope, insisted on co-authorship in exchange for giving us his codes. So we were like, okay, well, that prevents us from doing any independent analysis of your work. Forget you. So we ran the other 2 on our own. And we noticed that the social cost of carbon can drop by 40 to 200% under very reasonable changes to assumptions. But here's the kicker. It can even be negative at times under very reasonable assumptions, and the policy implication there would be that you shouldn't be taxing carbon dioxide emissions, you should be subsidizing it instead. So here's the thing, though, and this is what basically the tenet of my testimony on the Hill in February. I said that if these models are so sensitive to very reasonable changes to assumptions, then they could be easily manipulated by policymakers to get pretty much any result that they want, which is precisely what the Obama administration had been doing to justify its regulatory agenda regarding the Clean Power Plan and the Paris Agreement. So let's just put this nonsense in perspective, and this literally is nonsense when you really think about the broader picture and the elite left's goals over the 8 years. Let's just think about the big picture. They work to control the health economy through Obamacare. They work to control the financial services sector through Dodd-Frank, and then to control the energy sector through carbon regulations. And when you really think about it, the 3 of these together constitute a trifecta that represent a fundamental threat to freedom in this country, and it is incumbent upon ourselves to fight against. So how did the American people respond to this nonsense? Well, with a very simple answer. The election of President Donald Trump in November 2016. And one of the mandates President Trump was elected under, well, when you think about it abstractly, he was elected to literally kick down doors in Washington. Now, regarding the war on fossil fuels, he had a mandate to end the war on fossil fuels. It's been quite clear for years that America has a vast energy abundance. The models tell us, and I talked about this with the social cost of carbon, that carbon dioxide emissions in very reasonable quantities isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some suggest it might actually be a good thing if the SEC can be negative. So what would be the benefits of ending the war on fossil fuels? Well, firstly, let's put this into perspective. How much oil do we have here in the States? This chart is from the Institute for Energy Research's North American Energy Inventory, published in 2011. And here you can see, so the green portions are oil production, the red portions are natural gas production. The Institute for Energy Research estimated in 2011 that we have 1.3 trillion barrels of oil available and 2.2 quadrillion cubic feet of natural gas. And I was talking to somebody about that over there. The thing is, you don't know until you drill, and these are almost surely underestimates of the amount of oil and gas that we have here in the States. For example, in 1980, there was estimated to be a measly 30 billion barrels of oil reserves here in the States. And over the subsequent 30 years, the U.S. produced nearly 80 billion barrels. So, in terms of tapping these resources, can we quantify these impacts? Because now that President Trump is elected, let's actually look at the bright side. What would be the benefits of actually ending these wars on fossil fuels? So we use the heritage energy model to get at this question also. We took the reference case, the same reference case that was in the Clean Power Plan and the Paris Agreement simulations, and juxtaposed that against a situation where we significantly expanded the oil and gas available under the high resource case that the EIA had also issued. And overall employment skyrockets. We noticed that overall employment increases by several 100,000 jobs a year on an annual basis through 2035. And this paper is also back there. You guys are welcome to pick it up with my colleague Nick Loris and David Kreutzer. Family income also skyrockets. A typical family of 4 boasts an increase in personal income averaging several $1,000s a year up through 2035. How about electricity prices? We see a significant reduction in electricity prices contrary to the policies that the elite left wanted to propose. So what would be the impact of taking advantage of this vast oil and gas supply? At the Heritage Foundation, we use the heritage energy model to get at this question, and those are some of the simulation results. We notice an average employment gain of over 700,000 jobs, an increase in over $40,000 for a family of 4, an up to 10% increase in household electricity expenditures, and an aggregate $3.7 trillion loss in GDP, all for a negligible change in global temperatures, 0.003 degrees Celsius in temperature increase, and 0.02 centimeters of sea level rise increase. Okay. So who benefits from this almost? In the short term, the benefits are immense in terms of the actual employment associated with the extraction. Geologists, engineers, mathematicians, data scientists all have tremendous job opportunities here, as well as the local restaurants, hotels, motels, and so forth. In the long run, the fundamental building block of energy becomes less expensive, more available, and cheaper. Businesses make it easier to hire. Families have lower electricity prices. Everybody benefits. Yeah, okay. So, okay, going back to the question for the talk. What is the cost of ending the Obama Climate Action Plan? President Trump suggested it would save $30 billion over 7 years. It would actually save, according to our simulation results, $290 million. So he was $290 billion. So that was a vast underestimate. Ending the Obama-era spending on global warming, he suggested that it would save $100 billion in 8 years. The reality is it would save $1.3 trillion over 8 years. So these are vast underestimates of the cost of these policies. Now, over the next 8 years, if you compare ending the war on fossil fuels to these policies that the elite left suggested, we would see over 900,000 more jobs, an added $1.9 trillion of increased GDP to the economy, a significant reduction in electricity prices, and negligible changes in the climate and sea levels. So significant economic benefits, negligible environmental change. So what is the potential of American energy? Well, as I've talked about before, and I'm going to conclude on this, the sky is literally the limit, and we now have the opportunity of a lifetime to give the best gift possible to our children and grandchildren by taking advantages of our vast resources to provide the cheapest and most economical energy on the planet. And this is why the President is 100% right when he said, when it comes to the future of American energy needs, we will find it, we will dream it, and we will build it. So thank you. Happy to take any questions.